made a correction yesterday. General Yakubu Gowon did not become Nigeria's military head of state at the age of 29. Instead, he became head of state at the age of 32. And when he left office after the coup of July 29, 1975, he was 41 years old. We begin our conversation this morning, and we have joining us now Ms. Toyosi Akerele. She's the founder and chief executive officer of Rise Networks, an NGO that focuses on youth education development. Ms. Akerele, welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Uncle Kings. It's nice to be here.
Okay, I mean, we know your background at the University of Jos, student union activism, and so on and so forth. And you're also probably the youngest member of the Victim Support Fund for the insurgency in the Northeast. But our focus when we started this conversation yesterday, is on how to canalize the energies of our youth into more productive ends, in this particular instance, competitive politics, and also the dividends of democracy via national development. Part of our take on it today will have to be, it's important for the elders, as it were, to also hear out the youth. What is the world view, in your opinion, of the Nigerian youth today, looking at politics as a subset?
You see, my position on this issue would be very controversial. And it would lean a lot towards what the young people would expect me to say in contextual situations of this nature, especially vis-a-vis what the older people also would expect me to say. But I've made my position very clear on this severally, that while I do not, quite enjoy the body language of, successive governments to, in the approach to youth inclusion at various levels, I mean, for the purpose of this discussion, competitive politics, I would think that young people shouldn't just be given roles of responsibility, because we're young people. We should be given roles of responsibility because of a clear demonstration of competence, capacity, and the confidence it requires to be able to provide any level, of effective leadership. I'm a bit worried about the way young people are perceived, or the way our generation is positioning, to be able to get actively involved. World over, it's been difficult to, make reference to any case in point where you'd find young people actually giving responsibility. Most of the time, young people actually take responsibility. And, for what it's worth, I believe that leadership would, can begin from whether it's behind to the front, or from whether, and, Nigeria is not different. And whether you like it or not, President Jonathan's administration has been very, 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 I mean, this is not a campaign, but I mean, when we see the truth, it's important to be objective. This administration has been very supportive, in terms of youth inclusion. I'm not sure that about 10 years ago, you'd find a young person like me on a very important, crucial, assignment, like being on the committee for the Victim Support Fund. We also know how many young people were at the national conference compared to the one we had a few years ago when I was back in university. You also find that, a few very crucial positions, Shopee, you have several young people, in different crucial positions, given the opportunity to air their views and represent the interests of these young. Now, the question would be whether, when young people get the positions of authority, would they go on to be better than our predecessors, and would they go on to effect and institutionalize any relevant change that would be somewhat different from what we've experienced in the past? And so for me, it is the youth inclusion argument in Nigeria would be more for the significance of building the capacity of the next generation to take on the gauntlet of leadership. Because you would find that, politics is is seemingly perceived to be what you call, almost dirty and, murky waters for some of us. Some of us who are just technocrats who just believe that, would rather work with the international organizations than come to play politics here. We don't want to kill anybody. We don't want to maim anybody. But, I mean, the truth is, these days, there's only enough that people can take. And so because we're experiencing a situation where almost, the best are almost ruled by the worst, young people are beginning to sit down to say, look, we're not going to sit and take a back seat anymore and allow this guy who's representing me in the House of Reps or in the Senate, or as minister of my constituent, or as a House of Assembly representative, he's not in any way better than I am. And so for me, the point would be whether young people, whether my generation is ready to take on the responsibility of leadership, because there's no point in us trying to get to power to go and repeat exactly the same mistakes.
That's why I asked,
of the older people.
What is the world view of the youth at the moment? World view, that's in the context of our nation.
I understand.
Yes.
I'm excited to see the level of youth engagement, especially as regards, the way we're demanding mandatory accountability from the government. It's unprecedented in Nigeria, especially with the advent of, social media, to see young people push for, push in terms of certain levels of agitation, demanding that these are expectations of government. These days you have young people a bit more knowledgeable than we used to be. So we're not as, even though sometimes many of us will be perceived to be incorrigible, recalcitrant, obstinate, or whatever it is, you'd find that most of the time we're agitating for very, positive changes. Those agitations are very, while they may not be they may not fall on the good side of the people who are leading us. In the end, the truth is that the agitations are very, necessary, and these are things that are very crucial to a true, a truly democratic process.
Okay, anyone, youth out there listening to you talk will probably come to the conclusion that, see, the way she talks, she's not one of us, and by being one of us, I mean privileged. To be able, yes, to be able to forge ahead. Now, you have been able to break even in a difficult democratic environment where many youths have found it difficult to even, get their views to be heard. So, did you have to pass through the crucibles?
So let me make this clear. I wasn't born with a silver spoon, but my parents were very disciplined people. And the quality of young people we're raising in society today is a reflection of the kind of parents that we do have. I went to a primary school. I went to a public secondary school for my junior class. I went to a public secondary school for my senior class. I went to a public university. I was a graduate of the University of Jos. I was I was deputy speaker of the Student Union House of Parliament, University of Jos, when I was 19. But in fact, I started what you call the Uni-Jos Females Day. And that program is currently named after me in that university. And then afterwards, I started to do a set of RISE networks, and I started to partner with young people to organize, youth leadership programs. So, for example, I didn't go to school abroad. And the challenge that I have is young people consistently making excuses for what government didn't do for us, what private sector didn't do for us. I think the point is for young people to take on the responsibility that it is possible to achieve greatness in this country. I'm sitting, 2 years ago, I was sitting in my room. I was actually in the bathroom when when my phone, I started trending on Twitter. Why? Mrs. Michelle Obama was coming to Africa for the first time, and she was organizing the Young African Women Leaders Forum. And I was the only, she had recorded a video televised to America that she was, she had heard about my work. I organized the largest youth programs in Nigeria, and she was looking forward to see me. I'd never had any encounter, but in fact, I received mails to come and meet with her afterwards. I just deleted them thinking it was spam. But lo and behold, afterwards, I had the opportunity and the privilege to go and meet, have a conversation on leadership with Mrs. Michelle Obama. So the truth is, young people need to understand that nobody would give us that power. But we must also demonstrate that we are ready to take on leadership. The question I've been asking many of my contemporaries is, are we going to be any different from the older people? Every time I see young people these days, I'm afraid our generation would probably be a bit more corrupt, and probably be a bit more intolerant to opposition, because these days you sit down, the older people will sit down, have arguments, and they've mastered the art of dividing us. So the older people would sit down and have arguments about this, and they would mend fences. We, the young people, would sit down, pitch our tent with different people, and then we're upset and we stop greeting each other because somebody is APC or somebody is PDP. It doesn't matter. I think what is important is that Nigeria is the recurring decimal in all of this. And if we're truly passionate about our country, it would not be about what it is, what's in it for me, which has become the language of our generation.
So what explains this behavior in the youth, which you just described?
I already said that the quality of young people in Nigeria today is a reflection of the type of parents that we do have. In these days, young people clamor for unemployment, but you give some of them jobs, they would not resume early. You give some of them jobs, they cannot even do the jobs well. Now, you see, I went to University of Jos. I didn't go to Unilag or Ife. Forgive me. This is not in any way to undermine, to run University of Jos down.
Both of us are alumni of University of Lagos.
You understand? But you see, in the end, yes, University of Jos produced me. I'm a proud alumnus of that university. So you would, I went to university, I went to NYC camp in 2008, and even children's, and I say this without due sense of modesty, because I made the decision to be outstanding in school, even students who went to school abroad, who went to Cambridge, you see that they can't compete. Because the truth is, I've been in Nigeria all my life. I understand the way this country works. The fact that somebody went to Harvard does not mean we have access to the same internet. We have access to the same knowledge. Look, the environment is different. But it's this same environment that, you know, when we look on the negative side and say Nigeria is such a bad country, I need Nigerians to understand that we are the master brand managers of this country. For every single time you go on Twitter to say Nigeria is a bad country, this is not working, you are telling the international community bad things about our country.
But that's what exactly the young guys are doing.
Which is why we must change. We know that our country is not perfect. We have expectations of the government that may not be met on a consistent basis. But the truth would be that there's no country that was transformed holistically on the premise of complaint. The Book of Lamentations was not written because of Nigerians. And the truth is, Nigerians must learn to lead from a perspective of pragmatism and a perspective where it is not so much about laying blame on who, but in that small space, if you're a young person, you have a customer service role, how effectively do you do your job on that role? How early do you get to work? What are the personal values you embrace? In a country where young people don't want to work but want to earn money, what does that have to do with government? In a country where people drink pure water and throw it out through the bus window, what does that have to do with government? In a country where people get jobs and they prefer to be insolent at work and try to cut corners, what does that have to do with government? And people would make excuses of the fact that it's poverty. You see, you go to university these days, you see an average young university student who wants to carry a Gucci bag of £5,000. She doesn't want to work for it.
Aristo.
And do you understand? She wants to compete with the woman who has been in public service for 25 years. Life doesn't work like that. Our generation has got to understand that you cannot put the cart before the horse. We've got to learn that the only money that is sweet is, dignity in labor. And what the government needs to do is to find a way to celebrate some of the most outstanding people in this country. Because you see, the truth is role model. The idea of role modeling and mentoring has played a crucial role in the way governments and even leaders have emerged in developed nations. So in a country where people sleep with other people's children and they're given chieftaincy titles, people steal our money and they're given doctorate degrees, somebody has to convince my generation why we should not steal. Because the guys who don't steal are the guys who never get heard of. The guys who steal are the ones who get celebrated all the time. Yeah, and they're the ones who earn the privileges and all the perks of office anyway. Yeah,
Mr. Akerele, just hold on. We'll come again to the issue of mentoring, because it was one of the key issues that arose from our conversation yesterday.
Absolutely.
You have already identified the gap in parenting as one of the reasons why we are seeing the kind of attitude we are seeing from the youth. What, in your opinion, explains those gaps in parenting, or what are the kind of gaps that you have seen in parenting? You may not be a parent, yes, but what are those gaps so that the elders can learn from these gaps and then fill in the gaps and ensure that we have a more productive young population?
You see, because I'm a very traditionally conservative woman, I try to make sure that I marshal up my points in a way that does not, throw jabs at anybody. I have my parents at home. And the fact that an elder is not wise does not remove his eldership. So the fact that I insult an elder shows is a reflection of my own personal character, because I can disagree with an elderly person without, using any derogatory remarks. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I wasn't brought up to do that. I'm traditionally Yoruba and I'm proud of that culture. But that said, I'm afraid our parents have misplaced priorities in the way we're raising children. Even in the way we raise children that are boys and the way we raise children that are girls. I hope we get the opportunity to address that issue sometime, that there's nothing called a girl child. A child is a child, whether it's a boy or a girl. Because in a situation, absolutely, but we'll discuss that on, on a later date. But I mean, let's stay with context. Parenting in Nigeria has deteriorated because parents are misplacing priorities. You find these days you go to children's parties and girls are, young girls are wearing, clothes almost half naked. That girl becomes 18 in about 10 years and you tell her that no, you can't dress naked. That's what you taught her. That's what she's learned to, she's accustomed with. In a country where these days you go to schools, a teacher beats a child, the parents goes there to go and warn the teacher, why did you beat my child? That's the same child who's going to become a menace to society in another few years. And so I think that it's important for our parents to understand that the children of the poor these days are even doing better than children of the rich, because my Yoruba people always say, forgive me, It means a child that you give birth to that you don't raise well is the one who will sell the child the house that you bought. So it's not about how much money you have to train your children. My parents weren't very rich people. But in the end, I turned out well because I got the training, but I also made the decision to retrain myself. Okay. So parents need to learn that it is important that, one, the quality of education you give your children is very crucial. Number two, the values that you epitomize as a parent is what you hand down to the next generation. So if you are
parenting, it's a whole lot of
exactly, it's a whole conversation on its
own. So let's just stay with the issues. Now you talked about role modeling, and this is a question we put across to our guest here yesterday. Role modeling is oftentimes confused with Godfatherism. Could you help us put that in perspective? Role modeling
in politics.
Yes.
Yeah, in politics.
My role. Let me use myself as a case in point. So I have a few role models. Let's not bother, reading out names. It will be unending. I have a few mentors. I have a few role models in that the people that I look up to, I probably haven't ever met them, but I read about them from time to time. I want to live the kind of life they've lived. I want to be able to represent the values. I like where they are. And I would like to embrace some of those principles that have helped them to reach where they are. Those are role models. For some of them I've never met. I just read about and I try to, just follow through in the